Apple might be ruining USB-C for the next iPhones. See, a little while ago I made a video talking about how Apple's going to be forced to use USB-C on their next iPhones because the EU has made USB-C the required charge port standard for phones and other devices that might need charging. But Apple might be ruining that for the iPhone users in the most Apple way possible. Now, I don't usually cover rumors on this channel just because I like my credibility. I don't want to talk about how there's going to be a folding iPhone in 2 years only for 5 years to pass and no folding iPhone comes out, or talk about their cars or their headphones or headsets that are going to be revolutionary and have all these new features and then have them never come out. However, the more I read and saw documentation about this upcoming USB-C iPhone, the more I pretty much figured, yeah, that tracks for Apple. Okay, so what am I talking about? Well, like I said, Apple is going to be forced to use USB-C for the new iPhones because of the EU's mandate, but they very well may be still implementing the MFI standard that's been around since the iPod days. Now, what is MFI? Well, MFI stands for Made for iPhone, iPad, and originally iPod, and it was originally implemented on the iPod to make sure that you were getting a proper cable from Apple or a third party that was compatible with your iPod. And this originally came about because a lot of other companies began using a 30-pin standard, and it might have damaged your iPod if it wasn't pinned out correctly like the Zune was. Because yeah, the Zune actually used a 30-pin connector back in the day, and that 30-pin connector would fit into an iPod, but the pinouts for data and power were different, so you wouldn't actually be able to charge the iPod. MFI was created to make sure that when you bought an MFI cable, it would charge your iPod properly. This MFI standard was carried on to the iPhones and the iPads when they came out and got moved to Lightning when they changed over from 30-pin to the smaller and, at the time, way better Lightning cable. And the way that this cable actually talked with the phone was through some electronics in the cable that basically handshaked with the phone, telling it, hey, I'm a certified cable, you can charge it full speed or transfer data, whatever. It was basically just a way of the phone to talk with the cable and tell it, you're good. Now, whether or not you were aware of the MFI standard, you very well may have experienced it if you ever bought a cheap cable from the gas station, plugged it into your phone, and then had your phone tell you that this was not an authentic cable, and then potentially not charge. On the surface level, this kind of seems good because it means that you're not using some potentially dangerous or wrong cable that could damage the battery of your phone. But as you dig deeper, you realize the MFI standard is a little more nefarious than that. Whenever you see a cable in the store that has the MFI standard on it, this means that the company is enrolled in Apple's MFI program. So it has all the same hardware that you would expect from an Apple cable to communicate with your phone and allow your phone to charge and safely communicate or charge with other devices. However, these companies who have bought into the MFI program are paying upwards of $4 per cable in order to have this certification. This means that the prices of the cables are driven up because most companies want to make higher quality cables, braided or just generally more durable, but now they also have to pay Apple a fee in order to make sure that they meet the MFI standards. So whether you buy a cable directly from Apple, which in most cases is worse than the third parties, or if you buy a third party because you want a nice braided cable that's going to last, Apple's still getting the money because these companies have to go through Apple to be certified. All of this just to say that when it says MFI, Apple's making money on it, even if it's not made by Apple. But how are they going to do that if USB-C is sort of just the widely accepted standard? Well, what a lot of articles are saying is that Apple's still going to require these MFI chips or these MFI communication boards in these USB-C cables, and if they're not there, while USB-C is still going to be implemented on the phone, you may not be able to get full charging or potentially full data speeds on these devices, because if it's not MFI, even if it's USB-C, Apple just won't let it do what it would normally do. So that right out the gate really sucks. You're going to require MFI on these devices, even though they're using a widely accepted standard that my iPads, my Switch, my Mac, my Razer folding phone, all these devices use USB-C and can run at these higher standards and higher speeds, everything. You're going to require an MFI cable for these iPhones, even though they didn't on the iPads. Interesting. So yeah, that's one way that Apple's potentially ruining the overall USB-C experience for iPhone users, but the other is just the overall connectivity speed. As it stands right now, even though there is a USB 3 speed Lightning cable that existed on the iPad Pros for a brief time, the iPhones are only getting USB 2 speeds out of their Lightning connectors, and this means that on any of the new iPhones, 4K footage takes forever to transfer. And if you have a Pro phone and you film in ProRes, it takes even longer because a ProRes video can take up to 6 gigabytes of storage for every 1 minute of video recorded. That is just absurd in terms of data to be transferred over USB 2 speeds. But now some of you are probably looking at your devices with USB-C, like your laptops, tablets, or thumb drives, and thinking, okay, well, these are all USB 3 speeds or higher, plus I can do video through them, and I can do charging with them, and all that stuff. So obviously, Apple implementing USB-C on these phones will immediately fix the data speed problems. Well, no, because USB-C is just the shape of the connector. It has no bearing on the pinouts, data speeds, or capabilities. A lot of these articles and these leaked documents are implying that Apple is more likely going to use a cable like this on their standard iPhone non-Pro models, which is by all intents and purposes a Type-C cable. It's got the Type-C connector, but this is only going to do USB 2.0 speeds because while it meets the standard for the plug, it does not meet the standard for the pinouts of USB 3 or higher. Now, the USB standard as a whole is very confusing. There's tons of names, tons of different port shapes, tons of capabilities and speeds, all this kind of stuff. And Linus Tech Tips did a pretty good video breaking it down, but also explaining why it's really stupid that it's set up this way. And I'm not going to go that in depth with it. What I am going to do is show you what the USB Type-C could potentially come as, because there's not just one type of USB Type-C, which just saying that out loud really drives home for me how confusing it is, even just with one port type. The first and most basic kind of USB-C cable is a power-only cable. Yes, you can buy USB Type-C, the universally accepted next-generation cable, and only have power. That's it. And I've seen those, and a lot of boxes I've seen that have power-only cables don't particularly specify that it is power-only. They just say Type-C, and a lot of people see that and say, that must be what I need, I'll buy it, and then they can't figure out why their hard drive or phone aren't showing up on their computer. That's really irritating. I guess when Apple does implement USB-C on their iPhones, they're just going to assume that we should be grateful that they didn't use that and instead used this next one, even though this next one's not much better than power only, which is USB 2.0. Yeah, despite the fact that, again, USB-C is this hyper-capable, reversible, durable, all these things cable that is supposed to be the next-gen cable to carry us for many years, you can still buy it with a standard that my first computer had back in 2007. That's just insane, and that's the one that a lot of people are saying Apple is most likely going to implement on their non-Pro iPhones. This means that all the issues that we already have with Lightning are just going to carry over to the new port and the new iPhones, just with USB-C now instead of Lightning. Now, next up is USB 3.0. This is another cable that's been around for quite a while now. It's still better than USB 2.0 because 2.0's top speed is 480 megabits per second, whereas you get 5 gigabits per second on USB 3.0, and I hope that this is at least the minimum we get on all the iPhones, or at least on the Pro models, but still a little old, still not the fastest, and the internal SSDs of these new iPhones, especially the Pro models, are way faster than this 5 gigabit per second connection. So hopefully we get something a little faster, but 3.0 at least would give us something modern. Next up is kind of the awkward middle child of all these connectors. It's better than 3.0, but definitely not as good as the best that Type-C has to offer. That's going to be USB 3.1 Gen 2. This is capable of 10 gigabits per second, so double what the last gen was, but also kind of weird. I don't see a lot of devices with it. At least at time of research, there aren't any phones that really implement it. They're either on 3.0 or above this, so kind of just in the middle. I don't think Apple's going to use this one. After that one is 3.2 Gen 2, which again doubles the speeds, going to 20 gigabits per second. This is very fast, and honestly the one that I think will most likely be implemented in anything that isn't a Pro device on the Apple side of things. In fact, I need to check, but I think that's actually what they use on the iPad minis, which is kind of cool, but Still not the one that I hope for on the Pro models of the iPhones. The last one is the one that I really hope Apple implements onto their Pro phones, because they've already implemented it onto their MacBook Pros, their iPad Pros, the Mac Studio, the Mac Mini, basically everything with a Type-C port that's a computer or high capability like the iPad, which is USB 4. This is capable of 40 gigabits per second, and as long as it doesn't require an Intel handshake, it can also do Thunderbolt-capable functions. This would be the most extreme port to put onto the Pro model iPhones. This would be the most extreme port to put on any of the iPhones, honestly, but they already put it on the iPad Pros. They're already putting it into every Mac. I kind of feel like it's not too unreasonable to ask that they put this on all their devices. But again, from what I'm reading, the non-Pro iPhones are most likely going to be getting the USB 2 speeds, which would suck. I know we just broke down a whole bunch of stuff there, but I wanted you to realize how ridiculous the breakdown for all of these USB connections are, because you can actually get USB Type-C cables that are only Thunderbolt cables. You can actually get USB-C cables that are only power cables, and everything in between. It's ridiculous. Like, if I just held up these three cables here and told you pick which one does what, the only thing giving away that this one is Thunderbolt is the fact that there's a Thunderbolt on it. If this was just a black cable, you'd have no idea that this one's Thunderbolt, this one's USB 3.2 Gen 2, and this one's USB 2.0. And if you picked wrong, you would be running extremely slow through whatever device you're trying to run. Or if you picked wrong on the other end of the spectrum, you'd be using a Thunderbolt cable for a device that doesn't know how to talk through Thunderbolt. Look, I know I went on a bit of a tangent there about how USB-C is just the port standard and you can have any kind of capability in it, ranging from Thunderbolt all the way down to just power. But I wanted to cover that because Apple putting MFI into USB-C to limit the capabilities of non-Apple cables on the iPhone, and Apple using USB 2-speed connectors through USB-C will ruin the experience of the iPhone. But I also wanted to cover it because I feel like the fact that USB-C only standardizes the port and doesn't actually standardize the capability is another reason why USB-C is so easily ruined for iPhone users, because all Apple has to do is go, well, we made the port the right shape, we didn't have to do anything else, and that just sucks. The more devices come out that don't use high-speed USB connections and cheap out and use power only or USB 2, the more it's going to make it confusing for the end user, the more it's going to allow companies like Apple to ruin implementing USB-C on their devices, and overall it just makes for a crap experience. Look, at the end of the day, I love USB-C. I think that implementing it on everything is great because it means that you can bring one cable, one charger, and have everything you need right then and there. You don't need to go hopping around through adapters or anything like that. And if you do need to hop through adapters, you can do something like this. You can literally charge, run it through a display, and have a USB port, or just reuse the USB-C port. It's a fantastic type of connector. But the fact that it's only standardizing the shape of the port and not the capabilities of the port is just going to ruin it for so many people when companies like Apple say, here's your USB 2 speeds, but hey, it's USB-C, so, you know, we followed the rules. It's just frustrating because I know a lot of people who like to use the non-Pro iPhones because they don't need more than the standard iPhone 14, and they're going to get these new phones and they're going to wonder why they can't just buy a regular USB-C cable and they have to go through Apple, or why if they want to move photos over it still takes forever even though it's got this better port. Like, I always buy the Pro phones, so if Apple does implement the faster speeds on the Pro, it's not going to affect me as much, but it's going to affect so many people, and I just hate it. The fact that Apple has implemented the USB-C connector on everything else except the iPhone just shows me that they're being stubborn here. They need to pull their head out of their ass, and they need to just implement the best port option and the best speed for that port option, and maybe use that as a way to charge more for the phone. I don't know. I would hate that they would do that, but it would at least mean you're getting a better connector. But the USB standard needs to actually encompass the capabilities of the cable and not just the shape. That is so irritating to me. If these rumors are true, because again, I don't normally cover rumors on this channel, but everything I've seen, this pretty much tracks with Apple. Apple's going to be ruining USB-C for their next iPhone, and I'm mad about it. But I'm curious to know what you all think, so let me know down in the comments what you all think. Maybe, I don't know, it's not going to be as bad. I'm not a fanboy, I'm a fan, and I'm not a fan of this, so leave some comments down below letting me know what you all think. Aside from that, hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss more content like this, and I'll have another video out later this week that I'm really excited for, so make sure to subscribe and check that out when it drops. Aside from that, I will see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there, and have a good one.